So today is the topic you've long been waiting for, automating Internet Explorer with VBA. The whole idea here is that if we're just going to go to a website that has data on it, it's open, I can go straight to the URL, I just need the data off that page. I can do that with a web query wizard. We did that on like the same day of class. Now, after these many weeks that we've met, we can now do that. We now have enough background to be able to work with more complex web pages. Two things that the web query wizard is really deficient at. One, it's not going to go to a password-protected website. If you got to go somewhere, put some data in, hit submit on the button, the web query wizard's not going to do it. It won't. And then the second thing is the web query wizard only gives you access to the data that is right on the screen. It's displayed in the browser. What if the information you need is in the HTML but it's not shown, such as a hyperlink? Maybe what you need is some information out of a hyperlink, or maybe you need a hyperlink itself. The web query wizard is not going to give it to you. So for that, that's really what we're after today. So this is going to get us started with this. We've got a little, we're going to be working with passwords today. In fact, we're going to log into BYU's, to your BYU account. And for that reason, I don't really want to show my password to you in this example. So what we have here is I've written a function that will just read a text file and return its contents as a string. So we'll need this here in a minute. So we're going to start with a brand new workbook, except we're going to copy this into it. Let me go ahead and copy that. And let's go ahead and make a brand new blank workbook. File, new, blank workbook. Here I am, sheet 1, new workbook. Let me go ahead and I'll save this straight away. Save it. File, save. I don't know where to put it. I'm going to put it on probably in my downloads. Just make sure. So we're going to want this thing to be saved as we're working on it. You'll see why here shortly why we wanted to have it saved. I'm just going to call it controlling IE. We just control IE. All 60.
Well, what you're going to show us will work with other browsers besides Internet Explorer.
Okay, so the question is, will this work with other browsers besides Internet Explorer? And the answer is, what I'm about to show you will work with every browser that exposes its object model, that exposes its core functionality to the component object model. COM. I'm going to list those for you. Are you ready? Internet Explorer. That's it. That's the only one. So it turns out, like Chrome and Firefox, they expose their internal functionality, but they don't do it with the component object model. So there's ways to script those, but VBA doesn't let us do it. Yeah.
What about the new Microsoft Edge?
How about Edge? Does Edge export or expose its core functionality to the component object model? The answer is no. I'm hopeful that it will soon. Edge, is kind of promising as a browser. I'm hoping that Microsoft will be a little more standards compliant with it, but they're still pretty new, and so it's hard to say where Edge is headed. And so Edge is not a player yet. All right. You didn't see that, but electricity just arced by that outlet. It's by your feet. Just be careful. Anyway, all right. Yeah, unplug. I'm unplugging.
My thing just went out actually.
Oh, okay. So that just means we tripped a breaker. That's good. Probably won't spark again. The breaker's been tripped. The overcurrent protection in the building is functional. That's good to know. All right. So I'm going to insert a module. Make sure that I'm actually on this workbook. Insert a module. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste this function in. So this function is kind of a nice function. We will play with this in more detail in a coming day. But this, we just pass it a path to a text file. It reads the contents of that text file and returns the contents of that text file. So that just reminds me, I haven't actually made my password into a file. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to create a file with my password in it. I got to do it so you can't see me, so stand by. Oh, let's see. I got to not record it too. Okay, so I got to pause the recording. Where's my recording? Where do I pause the recording? All right. So what this function is going to do is it is going to read my password out of that text file. So I've created a text file. It's called pw.txt. It's in the same location as this workbook. So we'll get to that here after a bit. So now we should be kind of set up and ready to go. So step one, we need to have a sub procedure that's going to control Internet Explorer. So here we go. Sub control. Oh, darn it. This is kind of hard to see. I can't adjust it. I've got to figure out how I adjusted it in the past. CONTROLIE. All right. Our textbook tells us, our textbook shows us the two files that we need, or the two references that we need to include, the libraries we need to reference. So, step one, I'm going to go ahead and put it here in the notes. We need to add references for the Internet Explorer object and HTML something. We'll see. I'll go back and fill those with what it actually is. So I'm going to choose Tools, References. I'm going to scroll down and see if I can find this. Microsoft Internet Explorer something. Find Microsoft. Might be Microsoft's Internet Controls. So that's the first one. And then there's, does anyone have our textbook handy, like for chapter 29? The HTML object library. Go ahead and bring our textbook up.
Is it forms?
No, it's not forms.
Well, HTML object library.
Is that what it is? Are you finding that in the textbook? Okay.
It's just 4 above the other one.
Just want to make sure I'm getting the right ones. Here's chapter 29. Taking control, the basics. Should be this one. Create references. Here they are. Microsoft HTML Object Library and Internet Controls. Okay, so let's make sure we've got this. So Internet Controls and then HTML Object Library. Those are the two we need. You got them? Okay, so the Microsoft HTML Object Library and the Microsoft Internet Controls. Microsoft Internet Controls. And what is it? Microsoft HTML Object Library? Remember that once you've added those references to this workbook, they will follow the workbook. So if you're just copying this workbook, you don't need to add references again. If you're starting from scratch, you've got to add the references. Okay, so once we have that, we are ready to declare an object variable, dim IE for Internet Explorer, as, and we should be able to say, a new Internet Explorer. So dim I, again, we're declaring an object variable. It's just going to be, the object variable itself is just enough memory to hold the reference, the memory address to where this object's going to be created in memory. We say new, and it says, oh, we're making a new one of these Internet Explorer. Because we have reference to the Microsoft Internet Controls, then it knows what this is. Now, let's go ahead and make that thing visible. IE.visible equals true. I'm going to put a breakpoint on the end sub, and we're just getting started here. What that should do is it should create Internet Explorer as an object in memory, and then should make it visible. What happens if I create Internet Explorer as an object and then don't make it visible? No, it opens. It's using up memory. How does the user close it? It's invisible. They can't close it. they got to go to Task Manager to close it. So when we're doing development, for sure we want to open it so we can see it. But it may very well be that once we get this thing coded, we can do all the interaction we need to with the back end without ever showing the browser to the user. That'd be pretty good. Okay, I'm going to run this, and that should bring up a copy of Internet Explorer. You're like waiting for it to load something. It's not loading anything. This is it. What about the home page, default home page? No, it doesn't go anywhere unless we tell it to go somewhere. So here then is our copy of Internet Explorer that is now ready to do our bidding. So, first thing we want to do is we want to tell it to go somewhere. Where do we want to tell it to go? I don't know. Where's this place? Where do you go to get your schedule? MyMap. Where is it? BYU. Got to get the URL. Students. Where's my registration MyMap? There we go. Is it trying to go there? They're trying to go there. Here, I'm in good academic standing, in case you're wondering. I have a valid ecclesiastical endorsement, and there are no holds on my account. I also am taking no classes.
Do you have to get an ecclesiastical endorsement?
Every year. Yeah. And my bishop calls me in. So we're thinking about making you the high priest group leader. Just want you to remember that I've got to fill out your ecclesiastical endorsement here. So. Really? Yes, I'll be happy to serve. Okay. So let's come right here. By the way, I'm kidding. Right, so now we got to figure out how to tell our Internet Explorer how to go there. IE dot. Oh, thank goodness, we get IntelliSense help. Oh. Which one do you think it is? Navigate. Wrong. If you've got one that says navigate and one that says navigate to, that's probably the one you want. Navigate would probably work okay. I'm going to navigate and I'm going to give it a URL. I want to navigate to. Right, so let's see if I can make my window a little smaller here. Internet Explorer over here. The Web Test Recorder 14.0 add-on from an unknown publisher is ready for use. Totally me. All right, I'm going to drag my current position indicator back to that line that I just added, and I'm going to run it. Now, I want you to watch. So first of all, you're going to notice it's going to actually make this thing navigate somewhere. But answer me the question, does this page load first? Which one happens first? Does this page get loaded, or does the yellow bar get to the end sub when I hit play? Let's watch. That wasn't too hard to look at. Which one happened first? Yeah. So the thing we should learn from that is that when I say navigate, my code doesn't wait for me. You say, great, you want that browser to go somewhere? Great. And the code, it sends the instruction to Internet Explorer, and then it keeps right on moving. That's going to be a problem for us. We're going to overcome it today. But we've got to be able to tell it, go there, and then wait, because we've got to wait until you're there to be able to do the next thing. By the way, what is the next thing? Yeah, we didn't ask it to come to this, cast.byu.edu. We asked it to go to y.byu.edu. But because it noticed we weren't authenticated yet, and so it said, oh, you got to authenticate, and it redirected us somewhere else. So that's going to be what we have to do next. But let's get it to wait for us now. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. We're going to make a sub-procedure called wait for. Sub wait for. Now, I'm going to pass it a parameter. The parameter I'm going to pass it is going to be an Internet Explorer object that I'm trying to wait on. You might think one Internet Explorer object is enough, but imagine that you're going to, at some point, might be going, you know what, I'm going to have a page open here, a page open here, and a page open somewhere else. We're not going to do that today in class. One will be enough. But rather than just saying we're limiting ourselves to one internet connection at a time, we can declare as many variables as we want, and we'll use one function here that we can then wait for all of them. So we're going to pass it a reference to the Internet Explorer that we're waiting on, and then we're just going to watch that thing until it's done loading, and then we'll move on. So wait for, I'm going to call it, I could call it IE, but I'm going to call it Explorer here, just to enforce that the name doesn't have to be the same out here as it is down here. And this is going to be as an Internet Explorer. So now it turns out that there are several. Well, the Internet Explorer will tell us if it's busy or not. Okay, so let's just make sure you understand this. Let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and call. I'm going to say wait for IE. So IE is the name of my Internet Explorer object. I've opened it. I've created the object. I've made it visible. I've now told it to go to a page. And now I'm saying wait for IE. This wait for IE, someone explain to me what's going on. What does the IE mean here? What's going on with this IE? Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question. How come the Excel doesn't realize the wait for as a non-defined variable? How can it recognize it as a sub?
I didn't quite understand the question.
Like typically, like if I understand it correctly, the wait for is referencing the sub, so it'll run the next sub procedure.
Right.
So I guess I don't understand what the option explicit defined. How does VBA know that wait for is a sub procedure, not a non-defined variable?
Well, the question is, I mean, the fact is, I put there's a lowercase right here. It recognizes it, right? It goes, oh, we know exactly what you're talking about. And the answer is that the editor here is designed to say, you type something in here. Well, is it a defined variable? No. Is it a defined sub-procedure? Oh, yeah, here it is. It's a defined sub-procedure. So it knows that we've defined that sub-procedure and it's saying, great, I know what you're talking about. So, but I'm saying here, IE, the reference to the Internet Explorer object that I've just created. Why is it there? Why do I put it here? Right. The whole idea here is I'm going to send this reference down here. It will then take on this variable name, Explorer, and I'll be able to, whatever I do with Explorer down here, will be referring to my Internet Explorer object that's out here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you modify that variable in there and then pass it like back as a reference?
So yeah, the question is, could I change something about Explorer down here, and would it change out here? The answer is yes, it would. What's actually happening here? Can I draw this? I don't know if I can draw this. I've got one Internet Explorer object. I've got a variable bound onto it called IE. That's when we created it. When I pass it down to this other procedure, I've got another variable called Explorer. It is pointing to the same object. And so if I do something down here and modify Explorer, it's going to modify the object that IE is still pointing to. The whole purpose here is to be able to have one object that I've created up here and be able to do something with it in a different procedure. And then call this later, passing it a different instance of an Internet Explorer object and have it manipulate that. So here's what I want to do. I want to, in fact, I may want to just get down here. I'm going to run this again. I'm going to go ahead and close the Internet Explorer that I have open here. So I've got no Internet Explorer open. And then I will run my control IE sub-procedure. Okay. So here it is. I have it open here. And I'm now down here in my sub-procedure. So here, I'm going to say, I want, actually down here in my immediate window, I want to print Explorer.busy. So there's a property called busy. And while that page is loading, busy is true. When that page is no longer loading anything, busy is false.
Are you recording right now?
I think I am. Some recorder is recording. Click here to pause. Yeah, great. Thanks for checking. It's always fair to. Why it goes away down here sometimes, I'm not sure. Always fair to check. Hate to go the whole class without recording. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to just come down here and I want to just wait. I want to do something that keeps me from moving on until the Internet Explorer is not busy. Any thoughts on how I might do that? Yeah, I can make a loop. So let's just do that. I'm going to do while let's do this. Do until Explorer.busy equals false. Now, anytime I'm doing a loop that's sole purpose in life is to slow things down, I'm going to be darn sure that I put a do events in here. Remember what do events does? When I do that do events, it says, you know what, just look around for a moment, see if Excel is trying to do anything else. Otherwise, this loop might run so fast that it will never realize that the condition I'm looking for has been met. Okay, there's another thing down here besides busy that we also want to check. It's called the ready state. Right now, the ready state is 4. That's what it is when it's like totally done loading. When it's complete, it's called ready state 4. So I'm going to do until busy is false and Explorer dot Explorer's ready state is equal to complete. Ready state complete. That's one of the choices we have to pick there. It's just a defined constant that has the name. That should do it for me.
I have a question here. When I try to run exclamation point explorer.busy, it says runtime error.
So down here when you say question,
Object required, it says.
yeah. So mine's working, yours isn't. So yeah, sorry. Gonna have to reinstall Excel. No, I'm just kidding. Here's the thing, folks. So right now, there's sounds like you might have had your question answered.
Yeah.
But if I don't answer it, we're going to leave, students in our studio audience. You're in our studio audience. The ones watching the video late from now, we're going to wonder what the heck is going on.
Okay. I think I know that.
So yeah, that object has to be loaded into memory, and my variable has to be connected up to it. So it's not enough just that the Internet Explorer window is out here. My object has to be connected up to it, and so I have to be in break mode. So that's why I had a breakpoint down here on the end sub. I ran to this point so that my variable is loaded into memory, it's connected onto it, then I can play it. So now if I drag my current position indicator back to this loop, I should be able to step through this loop, like with F8. Yeah, and both of those conditions are met, and so it moves on. I'll take this breakpoint off. And F8 will bring me back out here. Now I'm just going to come in here and navigate again. In fact, I may just come over here and send this one over like Google. Now I'm sitting over here at Google. I'm about to run this. This is going to run 2 lines of code. It's going to navigate and then wait. And we're going to see now which one happens first. Does the page get loaded first, or does the current position indicator make it to the end sub first? Hopefully, it's going to wait until it's loaded before it hits the end sub. And so, did you see the pause that time? I don't know if you could see it, but you can go back and watch it. You can slow it down on the video. You can see which one gets there first. The point is now, before it actually makes it here, it has waited until the page is loaded and it's not busy, and then we're here. So far, so good? Okay. So now, we need to find the net ID. Net ID input. It turns out, that to really understand this part, we've got to have some familiarity with HTML. So you're used to looking at this. If you hit Control U, does it work here? Control U will bring up like the source for this page. This is what we're seeing here when I hit Control U on this is we are seeing the actual file that the web server sends back to the browser. The browser gets this file and it says, okay, great, I got to make this look pretty because my user's not so good at reading stuff like this. And so the browser looks at this HTML file and then makes it look like this. What the browser does. Takes an HTML file, just a text file, and says, let's make it look this way. So we've got to have some familiarity with HTML. How many of you are saying, I'm not familiar with HTML? Should be most of you. Okay, here's good news. Good news is our book has a pretty good primer on it. So right here in chapter 29, there's a bunch of stuff on it. But I'm going to take you through some things right here today. Instead of just doing Control U to see the source, which would work for us, I'm going to use the the object inspector, the element inspector. So right here on NetID, I'm going to right-click it and choose Inspect Element. This is going to bring up the source, but it's going to take me right to the thing I'm looking at. I want to know something about this. And so here, let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger for myself. Make this a little smaller. And let's try to inspect that again. Right-click, Inspect Element. There we go. So it has highlighted the tag. So this is the thing, with HTML tags. You get these angle brackets, which is really a less than sign and a greater than sign. But this is the tag that is rendered as that input box. A couple of things are going to be important about it. Okay, so we see it now on one line. So the very fact the tag name is input, that's what makes it the kind of thing someone can type into. And there are several flavors of inputs. This is a text input. It may not say type text. Oh, it does. That's the default. If you don't say type text, it assumes you mean text. This is an input of type text, which is the kind that you can just type into. But there's other kinds. There's an input. It's like the radio button or checkboxes. These are all inputs. Drop-down list is not technically an input, but the button on the form that submits, that's an input as well. Those are all different types. So I've got two things that I'm interested in here. And if I have either one of these, I'm in good shape. If this element has a name property, that's good. If it has an ID property, that's even better. Typically, IDs are unique across the whole page. Names don't need to be unique across the whole page. And so if I've got a name and an ID, I prefer the ID because I'd like to know I'm getting exactly to that particular one. If it's a name, it's probably unique, but not guaranteed to be unique. And so either one of those will work. So I've identified this. I've got a name here called NetID. So I've got to be able to refer to that through my code. And so I've waited for my IE. I'm right here. Here's how I do it. IE.document. That gives me the actual document that's displayed. The Internet Explorer object is like the whole browser. To get to the HTML, I've got to work with the document. Unfortunately, that's the end of my IntelliSense help. No more help here. There's a collection in this document that is a collection of all the tags. It is called all. I'm going to come down here to my immediate window, and I'm going to say ie.all.length. Folks, we are used to, when we've got a collection, we're used to having a count property that tells us how many items are in it. That's a VBA convention. This object is not part of VBA. This object was probably written in C, maybe C++. And so the method names don't necessarily follow the VBA conventions. And so the way that we ask for the number of elements in the collection is the length, L-E-N-G-T-H. And that tells me how many HTML tags there are in the document that is currently rendered in the Internet Explorer. Now, this really is a collection, and so I could ask it, what's the 17th one of those? Refer to 17 and ask for its tag name. And that's the body tag. 18 is something different. It's a div tag. It's just different kinds of tags that we use for doing an HTML document. But I can refer to this by its number, or if it has an ID or a name, I can use the ID or name. So the ID I'm after here is the net ID. And I've asked for the tag name here, and it's telling me it's an input, so that lets me know I've identified it. If I couldn't identify it and asked for the tag name, like I just spelled it wrong, it would give me an error. There's no object. You haven't got to an object. So that's great. That means I found that particular one. So I'm going to come up here, all NetID dot value equals, and I'm going to put my NetID. There's my real NetID, GAllen2. Who's GAllen1? I have no idea. I have a hunch that it's actually me somewhere else in my life. It was an old account. All right, now here's what I'm doing. So what I've done right up to here is I have gotten a reference to the object over here in Internet Explorer that is displayed right here as this little text box. Now I'm going to refer to a property of that object, and I'm going to change the value of that property. So I'm going to bring my current position indicator back to this line. I'm going to execute this, but watch what happens over here on NetID when I do that. So I run that, and pow, it has put that into my Internet Explorer object. That's great. That's wonderful. The world now is at my command. Okay, go ahead.
For the document.all, how does VBA know that the NetID is the ID, what do you call it, parameter of the input tag?
So the question is, how does it, we didn't tell it, it was the ID.
Yeah, so how does VBA know that that's the parameter of the input tag that we want to use? Why not name? Why doesn't it get confused with other ones that are included in that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The question is, we told it NetID, but when we looked at the NetID over here, somewhere was it? We looked over here in the inspector. That is the ID. Where did we tell it to look in the ID property? And the answer is we didn't. So there are 3 ways that I can refer to elements in this collection. One is by name, one is by ID, and one is by its ordinal position, just giving it a number for it. And so I don't have to worry about it thinking that it's the type, because that's not in play. That's not one of the possible ways that I can identify an element of the collection.
So what were they again? The
Name, ID, and then
number?
it's just, I can supply the ordinal number, right? I can come in here and say, I want the 18th tag.
So you could have used username in there?
Yeah, so the question is, could I have used username in here? The answer is yes.
Okay.
As long as there's not 2 usernames on the page. If there is, we need a little more work. But we should be able to just put username. It's probably the only one here. There's only 50 tags for crying out loud. Yeah. So username finds it as well.
But usually IDs are more unique.
IDs, the intention behind an ID in HTML, and it's not enforced, but the intention is if you have a tag that has an ID, there's no other tag that has that ID on the whole page. Name should be unique for the form that it's in, but if I've got multiple different forms, it's totally okay to have the same name repeated in different forms. There's only one form on this page, so we're okay.
Thank you.
All right, let me go ahead now and get a variable that's going to hold my password. So let me dim a variable called password as a string. I'm going to get the password equals PW, right? Wait, what did I, no, it's called read file. Now, I created that file with my password in it, sitting in the same location where this workbook is. So I got to give the full path to it, so I'll just say, read the path off the workbook. Concatenate that with the backslash and my file name, which was pw.txt. So when I run that, that should read the password out of that file and put it into memory. So if I come here and print my password, you'll, wait a minute, don't do that. You'll see it. Print the length of my password. It's 9 characters. Oh, you know too much already. It's 900 character password. The point is, I've now read that, but I have avoided putting the password into the code. That's a good thing. Don't put passwords in code. It's a little more work. Kind of put it out there somewhere, and we would be. This is only slightly better. Having it out there in a file. We can talk about some better approaches for that. That gives us the password. So now I would like to again put the password. So if we went and looked at that, we would find out that its name is its ID is password. I think the name and ID are both passwords. So I've got the variable that's holding my password. I'm going to put that into there, so when I run this line, we should see my password go in here, but of course it's masked with little dots. So now I'm ready to submit this form. I'm ready to click on that button and tell it to submit and authenticate. So let's take a look. I'm going to inspect this button, and if I can find if this button has an ID, I can just identify it the same way and click it. Just tell it to click. So I'm going to inspect element, and then we'll take a look at it. Question in the back.
Real quick, so if I want to do, instead of pulling the password from a TXT file, do like an input box each time, is there a way I can make an input box where it would have like little dots instead of the actual letters?
Yeah, so the question is, and this is actually a good way to do it. You say, I want to prompt the user for the password. The way that you do that is,
So I created the input box, but showed the password.
yeah, you're trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
You can create a user form that has a text box on it. A text box has a property called user form, or on a user form, the text box has a property called password character. And if you change that to like, a star or a Q or something, no matter what the person types, it'll just show that password character.
So you would reference user form from your sub procedure?
Yeah, you'd have to call up the user form, let the user type it in, and then you'd have access to the value of that. Okay, so let's take a look. Here, this should highlight what it is. So here's the input. The type of this input is a submit. So does it have a name? I'm not seeing a name. Does it have there's no ID, there's no name. Oh no! There's 3 ways I can refer to this. How do I refer to it? Name, ID, and this is the ordinal position. How do I know what ordinal position it is? If I want to get the ordinal position, I got to look across all of them for the one that's the right type and find that. Then I'll have the number and then I can use it. We're going to do that later in the example. We'll need to do that, but there's 2 ways to submit a form. If you can get to the button and click on it, that should always work because it really does exactly the same thing as the user clicks on it. But the form itself, right? Let's look up here. Here's this form. This form starts here and ends here, form to form. We're just trying to submit this form. Fortunately, the form itself has an ID. It's called credentials. So here's what I'm going to do for this approach. This is one of the ways that I can work with submitting a form. I can say id.document.all, and then the ID is credentials. Now, I don't want to say .value. I want to say .submit. That should submit the form. We will want to wait for the thing to load before we move on, so I'll put wait for IE. I've got my password in. Got my username in, I've got my password in. Now I'm ready to submit that form and then wait, and that should take me to my map. Ah, it didn't. Why didn't it? The reason it didn't is because the guys at BYU are really worried about security. And so when they send this thing out, they put an expiration on it. They say, we're going to give a code for this submit form, and if you don't submit it within a couple of minutes, it dies, and it won't authenticate. And so it did submit. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take this back up to where it puts in my username and password. We'll run it from there. You should see it put in username and password and then submit. Take me to my page, and then we get here to where we're at. Okay, so far, folks, how are you feeling about this? Are you saying, this might not be too bad? How many of you are going, this is hideous? This is what you have to do? Yeah, the answer is this is what you have to do. Okay, so far so good. We've now successfully put in a value. We identified where the forms are, put the values in, submitted that thing, and we're moving on.
Just to clarify, credentials, you just put, credentials.submit and that'll.
So yeah, the question is, where does this come from?
Yeah.
We just always put that in, and the answer is no. This is the identifier for the form tag. Here, let me do this. I'm going to show you this form tag. So here in my immediate window, I'm going to say I want to print not the value of the form or anything, but I want to print the outer HTML. Required IE. Oh, I moved on. It's no longer here. I got to go back to where I'm logged in. So the best way to do that is to stop this, close this again, stop before I submit, and run my code. So here we're ready to submit. I want to see, So now I've got the form that I'm trying to work on. I want to see that here. So what I did was I said I want to print the outer HTML of that form. Here it is, form ID credentials. That's the identifier for the form. But this is the tag it's referring to. It's everything right here. Right? It's got everything. I'm saying that form, and that's what a form is. It's a bundle of all the information that we're trying to send off to the server. When you hit submit, it's sending information off to a server. That form contains all of them. And so when I say .id.document.all.credentials, that refers to that form tag and everything that's part of that tag. So it starts with form and ends with /form. That's the tag, and everything inside of it is part of it. So when I say submit that form, it's just accomplishing what the user does when they click that submit button. Okay. So now, let's make the next step. So let's suppose that what we're trying to do, let's suppose that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find out the academic standing of all my students. I don't have any idea if I have access to your stuff. And we're not going to find out today in front of everyone. But the way this works is that, depending on what your permissions are within the organization, you put in a student's net ID here, click on go, and it will take you to that student's registration. My guess is you have access to exactly one record here, and that's your own record. But if I had access to more records, I could plug in a new record here, say go, and then pull the information off this one. Put in another identifier, go, pull that information, another identifier, go, pull that information, and so forth. So that's kind of the idea here. So let's go ahead and find this one. Now that we're on this page, I'll inspect this element. We'll plug in another net ID, and we'll navigate to that one. This one is called nav pattern. NAVPATTER. Very good. So now I'm going to put a comment here. At this point, I am viewing the registration. Hey, have any of you been students long enough that you remember before they had a wait list when you registered for a class? I used to teach, kind of teach this to my students, and there were always a few students that, would write a VBA program that would just log on to the registration and then try to add the class. And if there was no room in it, it would fail. And if there wasn't, it would have. So they're like, the class is full, there's no way to get onto a wait list. But if you had a program that would just go and try to add yourself every minute, as soon as someone drops, it opens up and you get in. I'm sure the guys at OIT hated me. They didn't know who I was. But they got a dozen or more people just add this class, add this class, add this class, add this class. What's going on? Can't you see it's full? No, you can't. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and kind of do the same thing that I had up here where I put in my username. Only thing is, I guess I can make this a little smaller. Only thing is, now it's a different control that I'm putting it in. What's it called? NAV pattern. In the world of web pages, things are very often case sensitive. I'm not 100% sure I have to make the case match here, but that's a good idea. So that should, if I want to run that line, it should plug in the identifier that I'm after here. Great. Now what I want to do is I just want to go. That will take me to the one that I'm after. And again, this seems a little bit weird because you guys only have access to one record. It's your own record. But imagine that we're saying we want to go to a different student, a different student, a different student. Now the great thing here is that this form doesn't submit like a normal form. And so we cannot just submit this form. This form doesn't even know how to submit itself. For a form to be able to submit itself, it has to have an action. Actually, it has to have an action. Never mind. Ignore what it is. It's a little complicated there. But let's look at this one. I'm going to inspect this button here. Inspect element.
Do all the pages have?
Do all the pages have?
I'm back on the page that you were looking at. that last name identifier, where is that at? I don't
Oh.
have
You don't have this?
it.
Well, I guess that means I can't look at other people's things. So you're not allowed to look at anyone else's. They don't even give you this part. What's that?
Probably for a good reason.
Yeah, that's a good reason. What I assumed is that it would be there, but it wouldn't just take you anywhere except zero. Okay, so you don't have that. Let me go ahead and kind of talk through this part that I wanted to show you. But I will show it to you back on the one that does work so you can see it work. I'm going to talk through the problem, then we'll show the solution to the problem on one that will work for you. So here's a form, but if we look at what that button does, that's not a submit button. Here's that button. It says go on it. It's an A tag. What's an A tag? It stands for anchor. It's a link. And this link actually runs from JavaScript. And so we cannot just say submit this form. We've got to find this thing and we've got to click on it. So since that's not showing for you, let's back up a step. And we'll solve the problem the same way over when we're logging in. So I'm going to close this, stop my code. Before I submit the form, we'll change our code here. But before I run there, I'm going to create a new sub-procedure. This sub-procedure I'm going to call getElement. So actually, I'm making a function procedure. Function getElement. I'm going to pass it an Internet Explorer object to work on. I'm going to pass it the kind of tag that I'm looking at. So I'll call this, Explorer as Internet Explorer. I'm going to pass it the kind of tag I'm looking for. Am I looking for an anchor tag? Am I looking for an input tag? Am I looking for a form tag? What kind of form it is? I'm going to call that the tag name as a string. And I'm going to pass another one called text as a string. So I'm telling it the Internet Explorer that I'm going to want to look across. It's going to look across all the elements on that until it finds a particular kind of tag, like an input tag, and then some other text that we'll use to make sure we're looking at the right one. Once it finds that, it's going to return an object. Okay. So let me declare x as a long integer. For x equals 0 to, where am I going? I'm going to Explorer .document .all .length. -1. It's a zero-based collection. The length tells me there's 100 elements here. They're indexed 0 through 99. All right, I'm going to put a breakpoint here just in code stop. Okay, I'm kind of ready to run this again, but I want to create, I'm going to create a button. Let me declare button as an object. So here's what we're going to try to do. Instead of submitting this by referring to the form and submitting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a handle on the submit button, and then we're going to click that button. That's how I have to do it on this other part I was going to show you, but you're lacking that part. So I want you to see this work. All right, so I'm going to set button equal to getElement. In fact, I'm going to wait to write that. I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and let's run this. It'll get this up and give me something to look at. So I am trying to get a reference to this object. Let me inspect it. And again, the problem is here, there's no name, there's no ID. I have to look across the whole set until I find the one I'm talking about, and then I'll have a reference to that particular one. So, the type here is an input. This is an input type. So we'll start off with that. So here I am going to set button, the object I defined up here, just to be able to get hooked up to that particular object, equal to, it's called getElement. I pass it my Explorer object, which is IE. I have a string here that's the tag name, that is input. And then I'm going to need something else here that is going to let me uniquely identify this particular input. It happens there's another input of type submit on this page. In fact, there's one right here. So there's an input, but that's the value of submit. I'm not sure where it is. There's another one on this page somewhere. And so it's not just enough to look for this word submit right here. So I'm going to look for a little bit more. I'm going to look for class equals submit. So the idea is I'm going to look through all these elements in this page, looking for the one that says, that is an input tag and says class equals submit on it. And I'll use that to figure out that that's the one that I'm after. So that's what this second argument is going to be for, and so I'm going to put in there class equals submit. Can I copy that? Class equals submit. Now, of course, I have the problem that I've got a double quote terminated string with double quotes in it, so what do? Just everywhere I've got a double quote that's on the inside, I double it up. So I'm calling getElement. I'm telling it, look at the Internet Explorer object, look across all the tags, find the ones that are input tags, and then find the one that has this string as a part of its HTML, and then that's the one I'm after. Question?
Do you have to put a space at the end of the double quote?
Or does that space have to be there? No, I just happened to copy it and get rid of it. That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to drag my current position indicator up to where I'm trying to bind onto that control. I'm going to run it. Okay, so it's got down here, now it's inside of this. So, I've got some, I'm on the very first tag. Let's just look at the tag name for this one. So the Internet Explorer All Collection. I'm just going to print the Xth element, should be the 0th element, and I want to see the tag name. It's the HTML tag. So that's the one, that's great. So now the only ones I'm concerned with is if the tag name of the one I'm looking at, right? I'm going to iterate across all these, 0 to however many tags there are. I'm going to look at the number 0 one, look at the number 2, the number 1, the number 2, the number 3. I want to take a closer look if the tag name is equal to what? Whatever I passed in. It's called the tag name. Then we'll want to do something. Here's a trick, folks. Different versions of Internet Explorer will bring back the tag name differently. Older versions of Internet Explorer will bring the tag names up in lowercase. This one brings it in uppercase. So because I'd like to not have to worry about the case of it, I'm going to make this a case-insensitive comparison. I'm just going to put a U case on both halves of this. The uppercase version of the tag name of the current tag is equal to the uppercase version of the tag name that was passed in. So I will put stop here. I'm going to delete my other stop and run that again. Now that should have kept going until it found an input. So I'm curious to see what X is at this point. So let's put it here. X, comma. So the 27th element, well, the number 27th element, the 28th element, is an input tag. Once I've got here, I'd like to see kind of the whole, I'd like to see that whole tag. Well, I can do that not with the tag name property, but with the outer HTML property. So the outer HTML shows me the whole HTML, the whole tag. That whole input tag is here. By the way, is this the one I'm after? Is this the input tag I'm after? No, this is the username input tag. But I'm going to use that outer HTML property to be able to tell if it's the one I'm after. So if it's the right tag name, I'm going to come in here and do another if. If whatever I passed in, the text I passed in, is inside of that tag, then that's the tag I'm looking for. InString, INSTR. Start at the first character. Look at the outer HTML, the tag I'm looking at. Look for the text I passed in. Here's text. It's the name of the parameter that's getting passed in. Look for the text and do a VB text compare, which ignores case. That returns the position of one string inside the other, or 0. So if it's greater than 0, it means it found it in there. So if that is greater than 0, then we found the tag we're after. Is this easy? This is not easy. Is that good news or bad news? On the one hand, it's bad news because it means you've got to learn something that's kind of hard. On the other hand, it's good news because once you know it, almost no one else knows it. So you can do stuff that people think is impossible. Okay, so at this point, we're ready just to return the reference to that. So I'm just going to set the name of my function, set get element equal to the tag that we're currently looking at. Is there any reason to keep looking at more tags? No. We found the one we're after, stop looking. Exit the function. I'm going to put a breakpoint on the exit function and run it to there. And now if I look at the outer HTML of the element, 35th element, does this look like the right one? Input, tab index 4, class is submit, type is submit, value is blank. Is that the one we have? Yeah. Tab index 4, class submit, type submit, value blank. That's the one. That's great news. So now we have found this. Incidentally, folks, do I expect you ever to write this loop again? No, I expect you to copy this one. From now on and forever. You know when you do this? Oh yeah, we've got that one. So it's the element. So that will now exit that function. F8. We'll get rid of that breakpoint. And so now I have bound on this object variable button onto the tag that this returned. So out here, I should be able to ask something about button, like what is the outer HTML of the button? And it tells me, yeah, that object variable button is bound onto that tag. It has that outer HTML. So now I should be able to click it. Button.click.
How did you define button on the top of this as object?
As object. There's another object. There's another thing that we could do that would give us a little bit better work on the IntelliSense help. Since it's an input element, I could define this as HTML input element. That's a comment. Is really going to make me do that? That would give me a little bit better IntelliSense help. I wish that they had just an object called element, HTML element. But they don't. They've got all specific different kinds of elements. And so in this case, the button, I know I'm only getting an input, and so I could make it the specific input element. I don't know who asked the question. But leaving it as object works just fine. This means I don't get the IntelliSense help. But now I should be able to run that, and it should, again, it was too long before I clicked it. So let's go ahead, back to fill it in, and it should get a reference to that object and now submit by clicking. So you see the difference here? One finds the form and it says submit this form. One says, no, they're doing some other kind of fancy thing here. The form might not even know how to submit itself. It could be using JavaScript to submit itself. It's more common now than it used to be. But if you can get a reference to the button that they click on to submit, you can click on that button and then you're good. Okay. Question?
Could you scroll down just a little bit in your VBA code? I need to see.
Is that low enough?
What you set with it. You set the get element.
So the get element function looks across all of the tags in the document of the Internet Explorer Opportunity you passed down. When I find a tag of the right name, it says let's look closer. Checks to see if it has the text is included in the outer HTML of that tag, and if so, it says, that's the one. Then it returns a reference to that particular object. Okay, here's the next step. Let me go ahead and let me stop this right now. So I've got Internet Explorer open, and I'm logged in. There's a whole great thing about the browser. It remembers that I'm logged in. I don't have to authenticate with every request. It's going to remember that I'm logged in. But this produces a problem for us. With this Internet Explorer open here, I'm going to run my code again. Now, what's it going to do? Is it going to use this Internet Explorer?
Another instance.
It's going to make another instance. Let's just watch it. I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and we'll run it. We'll run it through here. Okay, so there's my new instance. I'm trying to navigate to my registration form. So I'll come here, navigate, wait for IE. Okay, so I'm about to try to put in my username. What's the problem? I'm already logged in. Is this code going to work? No, I'm already logged in. Yum. How can I tell if I'm logged in? There's a really easy way. Let's do that now. So here's the idea. We're trying to navigate to the deep portion of this code, and if we don't get there, or if we get redirected to the login page, we've got to do this stuff right here. And so let's do that. We've tried to go to this page, we've waited for the load. So right here, let's ask ourselves, do we need to log in? And here's what I'm going to do. If IE document C dot location. The location of the document is the URL that it's looking at. Block if for that. And if, just comment this line out for a second so I can run this in the immediate window. So if I look here and I'm actually at the location I'm trying to go, I'm there. I didn't get redirected to the login page. So let's do this. Let's create another variable called URL. Let's say URL equals the value we're trying to navigate to. Then let's navigate to the URL.
Question, Professor Gubb.
Yep.
What's the command to close the IE?
Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there. It's IE.quit. We'll show it in a second. Okay, so IE document. Where's the instant? Okay, so here we go. So if the location is different than the URL, that means I got redirected somewhere. We can be a little more sophisticated about this and check to make sure that we're actually at the login page. But this will be kind of a quick way to get there. If, after I've navigated to the URL, if the location that I'm at is different than the URL, then I got to log in. There's all this login stuff. Otherwise, I don't have to log in. I'm already where I need to be. So now let me come up here. We're using this test. Oops. Oh, URL hasn't been set yet. So I'm going to stop this and I'm going to run it again. We'll see where it goes. Okay, so I'm here suspended. execute this line, wait for the URL. Now we're checking to see, are we where we want to be? Yep, we're already there. So it skips the login process, and we're ready to move on now with what it is we're trying to do. If we weren't there, it would go through the login process, log us in, and then we'd be in the place that we needed to be. Next, we got to start to actually get the data off this page that we're looking for, and we're out of time. But at the very end here, what we'd like to do is we would like to say IE.quit, which will close the Internet Explorer instance of Internet Explorer. So I'll execute that line. Here's my window right here. Should go away. That one closed. There's still another one open, but close the one I clicked on to. And then we're moving on. Folks, this is a lot to bite off for today. It's been kind of a heavy day. But this is the foundation of what we need to interact with Internet Explorer. Questions? Yep.
Last class you mentioned you're going to teach how to scroll through workbooks of the database project.
Yeah, I didn't do it. It's a great question to ask at the beginning of class when we had some time.
Yeah.
I'll have to post something on that.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. Class dismissed.